Good evening, everyone. Please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Mehrdad Madrasei, and I am an economics professor and the director of the college's Institute for Management Studies. On behalf of the faculty and staff of the Institute, I welcome you to the James W. Harding Executive Speaker Program. Before we officially get started, let me remind you to turn off your cell phones. Now allow me to briefly talk about James W. Harding Speaker Series. In March of 1997, Lycoming College was awarded a major grant from the James S. Kemper Foundation in Long Grove, Illinois, to endow the James W. Harding Speaker Series in the IMS. Since then, due to the generosity of the grant that we received, of the foundation, the IMS has been able to bring 2 prominent speakers to our campus every year. This year, because of the college's success in adding Professor Marshall Welch to the IMS faculty as the first Stanley and Jolene Slaughter Endowed Chair in Entrepreneurship, we thought it would be a great idea to make this event a panel discussion on entrepreneurship. Let me now introduce the student who will introduce our panelists and the panel moderator for this evening. His name is Danny Tierney, and he's from Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. Danny is majoring in business administration while pursuing a minor in psychology. He is a marketing intern at the Larson Design Group when the idea for tonight's panel discussion originated. In addition, Danny is number 13 and captain of men's soccer team. And now let's all thank Danny for all his help.
Good evening. I am honored to introduce our panel of entrepreneurs and moderator for tonight's presentation. The panel members are Mr. John DiMarco, Larson Design Group outside board member, Lycoming College alumnus and trustee, and former executive with Lockheed Martin and GE. Mr. Keith Kuzio, Larson Design Group president and CEO. Mr. Marshall Welch, Larson Design Group outside board member and Slaughter Endowed Chair in Entrepreneurship at Lycoming College. Our moderator this evening is Professor Heather Demshock. Professor Demshock is an assistant professor of accounting and CPA. She worked in public accounting with many entrepreneurs prior to joining the Lycoming College faculty. The panelists will discuss the evolving definition of entrepreneurship as well as what it holds for entrepreneurs. They will also discuss leadership of such ventures and the role of outside directors in the operation of these businesses. Let's give a warm welcome to our panel of distinguished guests.
Okay, thank you for that introduction, Danny. Good to see you again. And we do really appreciate you coming up with this idea to have us here today. First requirement of an entrepreneur, you got to be able to take a little heat. So obviously we're all working on that today, and we're going to do well. Wanted to give you a bit of context about the business that I'll be speaking to, and these gentlemen both participate as outside directors on Larson Design Group's board. So to get that started, we'll go through this pretty quickly. Our history is we're an employee-owned company. We were founded actually as an office of a New York State-based company back in 1986. Ken Larson was our founding office leader here, and he successfully built the business between 86 and 1992 when the owner, Bob Hunt, decided he was ready to retire. Ken stepped into entrepreneurial mode at that point in time and said, "Listen, Bob, we've had great success building this business in Williamsport. Can we buy it from you and sort of separate from the rest of the company?" We managed to work out that deal, and in 1993, we became an employee-owned company, 50 employees, 37 of us, put money into the hat and went out and got a big bank loan and said, we're going to build a local business here. The next stage of evolution for the company was Ken Larson's retirement, generational change, and the company further set its desires to be an employee-owned company and put an ESOP in place, employee stock ownership plan, to meld everybody's interests in growth and development of the company to performance and success. Since then, we've grown significantly from the 150 people to nearly 300 people, from 1 office to 11 offices across 4 states. We're a values-based business that happens to provide professional services. That's really what I tell people about Larson Design Group. Since our initiation as an employee-owned company locally, we've lived by these 6 core values. I won't go into them now, but if you want to check out our website, you can get a whole lot more information on them. But we base all our decisions and what we do on the values that have helped us be successful to this point and that we feel will help us be successful in the future. These are our geographic locations, as I said, 11 offices, 7 in Pennsylvania, and 4 in 3 other states above us into the west and southwest. We're operating in 5 specific business units where we give pretty significant autonomy to the leaders of these groups to develop the client relationships and business lines. Those are civil engineering as a practice, which has a lot to do with infrastructure, energy markets, renewables, as well as conventional natural resource extraction, transportation work, retail design work, and facilities and building engineering. So diversified company. We'll talk a little bit about that in some of my comments later. As a company based in Williamsport and sort of with a regional hub of offices here around Pennsylvania, we manage with our professional staff and deep relationships with our clients to work almost across the entire country. 43 of the 48 states in the contiguous U.S. We have worked in probably the last 5 years. Here's just some representative clients. We focus in architecture on retail design and work for large corporate brands, doing new store development, doing inline store development, creating new brands. The one on the lower right is a tech brand created by CompuTech, where they were trying to get into the in-store market. We did all that work for them. Buildings and facilities engineering work, broad variety of work, everything from Bowman Field, we've done projects there, historic Bowman Field, to compressed natural gas fueling, which is on the rise as we continue to develop that resource in the region. And we actually did the country's largest single-stream waste recycling facility in Las Vegas, tied into putting that equipment in the upper right in place. Gives you an extent of the scope in that group. We do conventional civil engineering work, land development to support different types of development, everything from casinos to retail, restaurants, and civic work. This happens to be the Civic Plaza in Morgantown, West Virginia, and that's Colonel Morgan, not Captain Morgan. Energy projects, just got a few very bland photos here because our clients there don't like us taking too many photos, but we do what's called upstream work to prepare for well drilling activity, permitting and things associated with that, as well as some of the midstream work to pipe gas to markets. And then in terms of transportation work, we do everything in terms of surface transportation, highways, bridges, bridge inspection, construction inspection, rail work as well. So pretty much full service in that area. Beyond our core things, as an entrepreneurial company that's focused on growth, we do look for innovation. We've worked on some pretty innovative project delivery projects recently. A big one that some people may have heard about is PennDOT here in Pennsylvania wanted to replace 558 bridges in 34 months. That's unheard of. $800 million investment delivered in under 34 months. LDG was a prime sub-consultant delivering 58 of those bridge designs. And somebody that contributed to that significantly is Dr. Morehouse's husband. David Johnson is an engineer and project manager with us who was deeply involved with that work. But we did our part of the job in 17 months, 58 bridges. We've also done things like create public education around CNG, compressed natural gas, as a viable fuel source. And we've built that into a national practice. We've also gotten involved with things like providing water to help service the fracking industry as an additional sort of side venture for the company. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the moderator.
I wanted to start the panel off tonight with perhaps what might seem like a simple question, but is not as simple as it seems, and that is, what is the definition of entrepreneurship? And let's start with Marshall.
All right.
All right.
Well, just like in my class, you're going to get more than you bargained for. And so what I'll start with is a definition of entrepreneurship from Oxford Dictionary. Oxford's a town in Mississippi, I think. Anyway, the activity of setting up a business or businesses, taking on financial risk in the hope of profit. And I think traditionally that's sort of how we think of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs in general. But I have a much more generic definition, and we'll talk about that, I think, in a few minutes. But for me, entrepreneurship is creating value through initiating thoughtful change. And it does not specifically reference profit, and we'll talk about that when we get to the evolution of entrepreneurship.
John, you want to tackle that question? Definition of entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I sort of agree exactly with what Marshall said. It's a mindset. It really is. And you can talk technology, you can talk new businesses and all that, and that's all important and risk-taking. But the real thing about it is having a mindset that you, what you just said, create value, and I believe to challenge the status quo to make it better. And when I look at entrepreneurship, taking it a little further, it starts with you guys out there, ladies and men. It really does start with you because it's what's in here. And if you're going to think entrepreneur, you got to think, what are the attributes of an entrepreneur? You got to care. You got to be passionate about what you do. You got to understand what you're doing and how it relates. Don't be tunnel vision. That's what you got to do. Then you got to be curious. Curious of what you're doing and what's wrong with it. Then you got to say, hey, this doesn't work. Then I got to come up with a solution. I found, and to give you an example, I was with a meeting with Jack Welch, about 50 of us, and one of my peers, I didn't know him, started complaining. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And then I seen Welch go nuts. Everybody ducked down because everybody's afraid. And then he looked at it, and what he said to the guy, and it resonated with me, is, you hear all these problems, well, what are you doing about it? And that's what entrepreneurship is. Don't just tell me there's something wrong. What are you doing about it? And what are you basically fixing and implementing? That's entrepreneurship. It's all that cultural thing in there. I live by a motto that served me well throughout my life, and it's real simple, and I think it's entrepreneurial. Finding a better way every day to make it better. Now, if there's an English teacher in here, she'd probably give me an F for my grammar, but that's really what I live by. And that's what entrepreneurship is, and being an entrepreneur. That's what you have to look at.
Yeah. I agree with everything that both these gentlemen say. It really is identifying new opportunities in the marketplace, taking a financial risk, obviously with hopes for profit. And I would take it, having control of your own destiny. With the advent of day trading and everything else, if somebody had some capital, they might just figure, well, I'll just invest in the markets. And to give you a sense of, taking the entrepreneurial drive, putting the effort in, having the passion that John talks about, you can really realize greater returns. I did some quick research. In the last 24 years that Larson Design Group's been employee-owned, our compound annual growth rate in stock value was 16.9%. In the same time frame, if you invested in the Dow, you get 10.4. Invested in S&P, you get 9.2. With no control and probably a lot less fun in the challenges that you'd encounter in the process. So I think from an entrepreneurial standpoint, there's that opportunity to create, to do more, and aspirationally for Larson Design Group, beyond the profit goal, which we're glad to distribute to all of our employee owners. We also had an aspirational goal of building a business that would bring people back into the community. Ken Larson said, I want to build a business here because we've got brain drain, a lot of smart people from the area going out getting these degrees in architecture, engineering, surveying, and we never see them again. And that's a loss for the community from the standpoint of community leadership and, honestly, economic development. So he saw the entrepreneurial goals as being, let's get a return for these people that invested in our company, for ourselves, as employee owners, but also for the prospects of giving back to the community through economic development and to community leadership activity. So those are additional dividends that we focus on relative to our core values.
In your definitions of entrepreneurship, how do you think entrepreneurship has evolved over the past few years, and what do you think the future is for entrepreneurship?
John, you want to start this one?
Well, from a mindset, I don't think things have changed at all, if you lay it out. If you go back to the entrepreneurs, the greatest entrepreneurs of all time, Da Vinci, Einstein, Stephen Jobs, they would be successful. Well, he was successful today, but the other two would be successful today because it was all their mindset. So nothing's really changed from that and from you guys. What has changed is the world has changed. And I think it's changed in 3 areas that's limiting entrepreneurship. I think, one, we're getting specialists. Everybody's looking this way rather than this way, broader. Whether they're marrying, you want to marry the arts and the sciences is a way of looking at it. But we're getting too much specialists. 2 is technology. It's changed the world. It is great technology. But the problem is it's still an enabler. We still need people to think. We still need people to get involved. But too many people use technology as a crutch to do their job. And when that happens, the technology becomes the master and you become the slave. And that's wrong. So that's the second thing that I see from a technology standpoint that is changed in the world where we're going. And then the third thing is the rapid change of the world. If you're not going to be thinking entrepreneurial, if you're not going to be passionate in what you do, you're going to have a hard time. Look how the world has changed. When I started back in '76, we didn't have computers. We did everything by hand. 1980, we had the first Wang computer. It was about this big. Your phone today is probably 10,000 times more powerful than that Wang computer, is what you looked at. And when we looked at it, you look how we've come, and every year how things have changed. So from my standpoint is, the change is happening so rapidly, so great, that if you're not going to adapt, change, be entrepreneurial in your mindset, the world's going to leave you behind. So you want a better life? You want a better career? You have to be entrepreneurship. Why 20 years ago, you'd find people in the same job doing the same work for 25 years. All they did was, I started my job, I'm going to retire at 60, and I'll do the same thing for 40 years. That doesn't exist anymore. Look at our technology changing what we're doing and eliminating jobs. It's eliminating jobs and creating jobs. So the question is, do you want to be eliminated or do you want to be on the wave that grows with it? So that's what I look at, how it's changed, that the world has changed, but the thinking of an entrepreneur has not changed.
Yeah. I'd agree with John. And around technology, we have a changing of the guard. From boomers to millennials, I don't like to use millennials, I like to use digital natives. All you people in this audience have no fear of technology and understand how to use it as an enabler. So that's really changing, from a business perspective, relationships with customers and how we interact with them and the expectations of customers. And it's also affecting, if you're in a business that's new and has to get out there, the way you build your brand. I mean, that's huge. And it's also impacting the way we deliver the products and the services that we provide as entrepreneurs. Every day changing, disruptive technologies, new business models coming out all the time. So and I don't see any end to it. I only see it accelerating. Marshall?
I agree with John from the notion of the mindset of entrepreneurs really hasn't changed. But what's changed a lot more than just the pace of technology is the notion that everybody in this room could be an entrepreneur. 20 years ago, it was a special breed. You couldn't teach entrepreneurship, and there's still, some kind of irrelevant debate, in my opinion, that you can't teach entrepreneurship. You're either born an entrepreneur or you're not, end of story. And I couldn't disagree with that more, because what John talked about in his 3 points is really something that everybody in this room needs to think about. From an entrepreneurship standpoint and studying the qualities of an entrepreneur, how to have grit and determination and a lot of those characteristics that John is describing, is you don't need to be the lead dog To be entrepreneurial, you can certainly start your own company. You can do consulting. You can do a number of things with the technology of the internet and other technologies that exist. You can be entrepreneurial in programming and things of that nature. And so you can certainly be the next Bill Gates, the next Steve Jobs, whatever that stereotypical definition is. And by the way, all of our examples are generally white male. And that notion is completely destroyed in this day and age. Because the second thing that you can use entrepreneurship for, or being entrepreneurial, as John talks about, is go to work for an entrepreneurial company. When you guys do your job searches and you look where you want to go, there are tens of thousands of emerging growth companies with people doing cutting-edge work in whatever your major is. This isn't just about business. It's about chemistry, biology, art, music. You can be entrepreneurial in any of the majors within Lycoming College. And by the way, when you look at it from a financial standpoint, if you happen to be employee number 10 at Microsoft, do you think you retired comfortably? Yeah, kinda. Microsoft produced several hundred millionaires. And so, but my point in that, in learning the traits of an entrepreneur, if you apply and go to work with an emerging growth company, a small company, and you're up against another candidate from, let's just say, an irrelevant school like Gettysburg, that's where I went to school, and you understand the issues that business owner is facing, you have a leg up that other person doesn't have. So if you're the chemistry major that understands the cash flow and the other issues, you stand a significantly better chance of A, getting the job, and B, contributing. And finally, to wrap it up, even if you do choose corporate America, even within your job, within your division, for you to think entrepreneurially and have your boss know that when he gives you an assignment that you're going to get it done, whether it's the traditional way or thinking outside of the box in some way, those three ways, being the lead person with an entrepreneurial company or even with a larger company and thinking entrepreneurially, it will serve you well for a long period of time. And the translation of that is, it's now through the technology accessible to everybody in this room. Regardless of race, gender, or any other qualifier, everybody in this room has the capability to do what we're talking about.
One thing, I agree with Marshall 100%, but I think it's so critical for you guys. If you don't become entrepreneurial, you won't be successful. If you don't get the entrepreneurial spirit, you won't have a better life or a better career. You don't have a choice. I had a choice 40 years ago. You don't, because the world will just pass you by. So that's how critical it is for your thinking to get that way and to have a good life, a good career. There's no choice anymore.
Okay, so this kind of leads into my next question, which is for Keith.
Okay.
Keith, as the CEO of an entrepreneurial organization, how do you lead an organization like that, and how do you utilize outside directors?
Oh, okay.
Such as
Thank you.
Marshall and John.
Yeah. Leadership really starts with creating a vision for an organization that is strongly founded in a sense of purpose. You can be a leader, but if you don't have a vision and a purpose, you're going to find pretty quickly there aren't many people that are going to follow you. So I think that's really important. I think in terms of leading an entrepreneurial company, you got to be focused all the time on culture. And that's something that both of these gentlemen, as outside directors, we talk about it at just about every board meeting that we have. Critical that you build a culture that's aligned with your values, and then that's also aligned with your strategies so that you can perform well. Because how many people have heard the story that culture eats strategy for breakfast? It used to be lunch, but now it's breakfast, and based on the way things are changing. So, a leader, it's critical that we engage, energize, and empower our people. A big pitfall, one of the things early in my leadership career and in taking over the entrepreneurial reins of the company was thinking I had to do everything myself. And I quickly learned I have a lot of capacity and a lot of desire and interest. I can't do it all, and the company's going to be better by empowering other people. Show them the vision, show them the path, give them the guidelines, the cultural norms to follow, and the high performance goals that you want to set, and let them run with it. So I think another role of a leader is to recognize and encourage risk-taking. Recognize it in the successes and in the failures. Because in failures, you learn. Lots of entrepreneurs weren't successful in their first venture or their second or their third. Go back to Thomas Edison, and you can repeat that, time after time after time. So I think a leader really needs to be focused on doing those things. Encourage risk-taking, reward and recognize it, work it out, what the lessons were that will make the next effort successful. And finally, reinvest. It's not all about profit and taking everything out of the business. I think in some cases there are some very entrepreneurial companies that became quickly successful, and the leader said, well, you know what, I'm going to draw a lot out and maybe build it to their lifestyle, and you can snuff out a business if you're not focused on reinvesting. So from the standpoint of 3 things to do as a leader, I think you've got to focus on operating your entrepreneurial business. Think of it as a triangle. Base is operating. Every day you've got to be focused on what's going on, figuring out how to do better. Second, focus on growth strategy. That's the middle. How are we going to continue to grow what we have and expand what we have? Third, the top of the pyramid is transform, because you're only relevant for so long. And there's going to be another entrepreneur out there, another competitor, that's going to try to one-up you. They're going to emulate you, they're going to find your weaknesses, they're going to move on. So leaders and entrepreneurs have to focus on that. Outside board members, what do? I brought them in for perspective, business acumen. These guys both have done quite a bit. They see blind spots that I don't see. I'm an engineer. I do things and have learned in a certain classical engineering way to approach problems. In their backgrounds, liberal arts degrees, completely different. John's this, that was me. These guys, liberal arts, that's them. And that really helps our organization assess risks, find blind spots, and they're just a sounding board when you come across challenges. They also provide independent governance. Inside a company and inside our ownership, if it's all of us around the board table talking about the business, there can be groupthink at times. So bringing outside board members creates an opportunity for independence and better governance from my perspective. And then the final thing that's critically important and valuable for any entrepreneur or business leader is coaching. I really, in my career, have found, and has been very recently with the support and encouragement of Marshall, to say, Keith, get an executive coach, because we can take this business further and faster if you want to do that. And it's been a great experience. So I'll talk more about coaching later. But these guys as coaches to us in the boardroom, but then also encouraging individual and personal coaching outside of it, provide great value.
John and Marshall, how do you see your role as an outside director of an entrepreneurial organization?
First off, just to double check, anybody in here not understand what an outside director is?
That's probably a good question.
All the other board of directors at Larson Design Group are generally officers of the company. So you've got the chief financial officer who's here with us tonight, Brendan Nichols, and by the way, from an evolution standpoint, Brenda is also the chairwoman of the board, which is, especially for engineering, which is a male-dominated industry, a real statement that Larson Design Group has Brenda as the chair. Started just about the same time as Keith and has been integral in the growth of the company. But John and I, and there are 2 others, we have no other affiliation with Larson Design Group other than being board members. And so we don't get a paycheck, we don't get, we're not involved in the company, we're actually not even shareholders of the company. So our viewpoint is sort of untainted from any of those perspectives. But I think Keith really largely covered it, especially in my case. John has been in the industry historically with Lockheed or utilized engineering services. My background is corporate finance, mergers and acquisitions, having done some entrepreneurial things as well over the course of time. And so I think primarily, certainly an eye on the numbers, on the financial statement that's a little bit different view than the way the company and the way the officers are looking at it. And then I think probably one of the largest roles that I've played is from a governance standpoint. And that is that it's sort of a funny example, but unfortunately in this day and age, very true, that as companies make decisions, you need to say, if you ever put on the stand in a court of law or really looked, somebody really objectively, asked you, how did you make that decision? That we can honestly say that we've made good business decisions in a way that didn't benefit one group over another within the company, that the officers are fairly compensated, so that, you know, we've got all these employee owners and Keith and the other officers running the company, and we're able to say that we do things in a very proper manner. And I think that from a governance standpoint and how Larson Design Group runs the company, that again, it's very cutting edge for a company with 300 employees to have 4 outside directors, 3 of which primarily come from the industry, and then the Lone Ranger here who brings a little bit of different perspective.
Right.
John?
I think what Keith said was right on target. I look at it, and it all starts with vision. And as an outside director, our goal is to make sure it's nice to have the flowery language and all that kind of stuff. It's all garbage unless you can execute. If you can't execute, you're wasting your time. I mean, you'll see great visions, but they don't execute, so that company goes down the tube. So that's one of our things is his vision reasonable? Is he going to be able to execute the vision? The second thing is, it all starts with people. You've ever heard, he didn't say people, he said coaching, people being challenged, growing people. Because without an organization with great management and great people, you can't succeed. If you have great management and terrible people, the company's going down the tube. If you have great people and terrible management, guess what? All the great people are leaving, and then you're going down the tube. So he's talking about how it all has to be in sync. And as an outside director, we got to make sure through employee engagement surveys and everything else and what we hear that everybody is in sync and everybody feels part of the company. It's not, the old school 40 years ago was dictatorial. Your boss told you what to do, and you did it, and you didn't say a word. That was the old school. And if you question it, you got in all kinds of trouble. And I believe me, you see these wrists, I got in a lot of trouble. I never learned how to keep my mouth shut. It's my problem. So, but in reality, it's really true what you said there. And that's the culture. And it's the entrepreneurial culture. Looking to create value in doing things. You're going to hear this over and over again. And that was one thing Welch told me. When you have a message, repeat it 100 times. And then when you do it again, repeat it another 100 times so it sinks in. And it's about creating value. What's the purpose of a business? To serve a customer and create a customer. So when you look at what Keith's saying is, we have to have a vision where we're going. We have to have great people. And then we got to serve the customer. And you got to serve the customer efficiently. That's what entrepreneurship is, and that's what our job is, to make sure we're on it and that we're measuring what they're doing. And we sort of change the direction sometimes where they're going, but not much. We are going in a good direction. It is an entrepreneurial company that has really good leadership. So I expect us to continue to grow. And when you think, you guys might not realize, but 17% a year means you're compounding your money about every 4.5 years. So you think about it, if you put your money in there, the kind of returns he's delivering. That's a heck of a statement. But that's our goal, is to continue the juggernaut going forward.
Shift the conversation in a little bit of a different direction. How do you see the role of entrepreneurship at Lycoming College, and what advice would you give our students? Who would like to take that one? How about John?
Wow, I might stand up on this. First of all, it's the Italian in me. As you notice how far apart they are. The Italians want to do this. I don't want to hit somebody. But all kidding aside, I think starting the program is a grand slam.
Yeah.
Because it's all about getting people to think. What is not good, and I have to tell you, is I'm looking out here, great diverse audience, but guess what? I don't see an art major here. I don't see an English major here. I don't see history. Oh, we do. Thank you. So maybe
there you go.
I don't see a history major, because entrepreneurship isn't just business. It's everything. What are you trying to do? Create value to be better. That's what you're talking about. So when I see it, I think it's a home run what he's doing. And it's good that I can sit up here and talk about what a great job he has to do. He's got to figure out how to do it and implement it. And what we're talking about, a cultural change in your mind. But it ties in with the liberal arts education. Yeah. I find the biggest thing about Lycoming that made me somewhat successful is I have the ability to think. Because that's what entrepreneurs have to do. Think. You don't do things by rote. You don't do things just because the person before you did it. You think what you're doing, you understand what you're doing, and then you challenge it and go on. And so I think the entrepreneurship is a home run. And as they develop it over time, I personally think, and I know I'm being a trustee, I'm not telling you what to do, Ken, but
It's advising, how's that?
I think every student in Lycoming should take at least one course. It should be a requirement, because I want you thinking. I want you, when you come out to the working world, whether you're a janitor, whether you own your own business, whether you go to be a corporate weenie, like my brother would say, or you go into your own businesses, we want you thinking. And if you think and you create value, you will be successful for your life and your business. And it's both. You don't just want business, you want both. So I think it's a home run, grand slam.
You go, great. I agree with everything that John said. As I said in some of my earlier comments, liberal arts, you've got a view of the possible. I'm an engineer. I'm a view of what's the problem, how do we solve it. So from that perspective, I think you have an advantage, and I think adding an entrepreneurial track or program for you allows you to access something that Richard Florida, an author you might have heard of, wrote a book called The Rise of the Creative Class. And if you take a liberal arts school based on broad thinking, as John said, liberal, wide, just creativity that's different from any other type of education you might get, certainly a classical engineering education. It allows you to access some of the other things we talked about. Barriers to creating businesses and being entrepreneurial have dropped. Back in 1993, when we became an employee-owned company, had to take out that big loan, you had to sit across the table from a banker and convince them as why they should loan money to 37 owners with no personal guarantees. That was a big deal, but we got it done, and it took time. Today, you want to start a business, what do? You go to LegalZoom, right? You get yourself incorporated. You need to raise capital, what do? You go to crowdsourcing. You can raise capital. If you got a good business plan, a great idea, you can do that. So you combine that with the creativity that you all have and the rise of a creative class. That's why you see things happening like, the rise of microbreweries, craft brewing. Look at how many people have gotten into that. It's something they enjoy, expressing themselves, creating. And I think that's really the wave of the future. So the importance of entrepreneurship, as John said, I think is that anybody in this room, with interest and passion has access to these resources to create opportunity for themselves. And, and if they choose to pursue a social agenda with that, they can tie that to it. And we see that happening a lot. And I think there's much more of that you'll find at a Lycoming college as well. Marshall?
For me, I think the program is really about possibilities. And in my first little rant about the program, which the folks in my couple of sections of entrepreneurship get just about every day, it's about possibilities, because one of the things I missed talking about when I simplified my definition is entrepreneurship also has nothing to do with making money. Entrepreneurship is about creating value and having an idea. And then if you choose to monetize that idea in a way that you can sell it, whether it's a product or a consulting service, that's fine. But what's become very vogue in the last 10 years over this evolution of entrepreneurship is what we're calling social entrepreneurship. And with my definition, you actually start with social entrepreneurship, because it's a distinct and separate decision that you've got when you come up with an idea that you're going to figure out a way to make money with it. And what I mean also about possibilities is, if you look around the world, and you guys are all very in tune with what's going on, and you look at how we as a global community are solving issues like education in Africa, education all over the world. It is not being done by governments, which we have traditionally relied on to advance educational agendas. It's being done by entrepreneurs who are either raising money entrepreneurially and then coming up with entrepreneurial systems to create charter schools and other types of educational institutions all over the world. And that happens here in the US, and there can be a debate about that the federal government should do a better job, but the reality is they aren't. And so entrepreneurs are coming up with tons of different ideas within the field of education, generally in a socially entrepreneurial way, in that they're not getting rich from it. Certainly there are people selling educational systems and online programs and things like that that are monetizing it, but it has a lot more to do than just about making money. And then the other thing I just want to sort of expand on, and we'll take some questions, is John and Keith talk about the liberal arts educated person having a broader view of the world. And while I agree with that, for the people in my class, it's also about what's your why and what's your dream, what's your passion. And if that's art and that's music, one of the books I actually recommended that Dr. Trustee read is a book called Real Artists Don't Starve. And it's this whole notion that you go to a liberal arts college and you major in art, and then you got to go do something else in order to make a living. And if you think entrepreneurially within just an art major, there are tons of applications now with art and psychology that are very entrepreneurial. Art with education, with disabled children and people who have learning disabilities. But these are all entrepreneurial possibilities that, regardless of what your major is, archaeology, any of the specialties here at Lycoming College, that you don't need to follow the traditional model of what you're going to do professionally when you leave. If you arm yourself with the skills of what we talk about in not just the basic entrepreneurship class, but other classes that will be rolling out over the next 12 months, you can equip yourself, as John especially has talked about, the options for what your world can be open up exponentially. And so I think the future, while it would be really great if we made it a requirement, assuming that that's not going to be the case, as many of you that possibly can fit it in your schedules over the course of your time at Lycoming, at least getting an introduction to what entrepreneurship is all about, I guarantee you will serve you very well.
Absolutely. So at this point, we'd like to open up the panel to questions from the audience. So hands are great, but if you could head to the microphone right there in the middle of the room, that would be wonderful.
Don't be
Thank you,
shy.
Alex.
Hello, gentlemen. So my question is, what are 3 traits a good entrepreneur should have?
3 traits they should have. One, I think Marshall alluded to, I'll start with that, is they have to know their why. They should have a strong sense of purpose. I would say they should be able to plan. I tell people all the time, have a plan and work the plan and learn from the plan. So I think, planning is important component, and some discipline around that. Then I think the third point I'd make is that be open to and seek constructive feedback. Ask people to be real with you about, your ideas, how you're performing, how you can improve. And if you have a strong purpose or sense of your why, you won't look at that as something that feedback that is maybe demeaning. It won't affect you that way, and it shouldn't affect you that way. You should take that constructive feedback as a way for you to reinforce your purpose and your goals with those plans that I suggest that everybody has.
I would tell you have to be curious and question the status quo all the time and not accept it. Now, and then deal with it in the right way. Because, some people don't like the status quo and violence happens and all that. 2, I think you got to be passionate and love what you do. I tell you, I didn't work for 40 years. It was one big game to me. And when I retired, it was harder being retired than it was working, because work was just fun. And you don't want to spend your life dreading what you do. I'm just going to tell you. And the third thing is, no matter what they say, you have to be patient, but it's going to be hard work. There is no substitute. And these are basic concepts that get repeated, and they are. But there's no substitute to hard work. If you work hard, you're passionate, and you're curious, you guys will be successful. And the sky's the limit for you.
I'm going to stick with 1, and it's resilient. You've got to have resiliency. And fear of failure is something that we are taught. Because who walked over here from campus? Who walked? Okay? Or walked from your car? Okay? Right? Okay. So how come you guys didn't quit? When you were really little and you were learning to walk, how come you just didn't bag it and decide that I'm going to keep crawling? Because you didn't know better. How many of you knocked over the water or the milk when you were a little kid? And your parents corrected you and made you realize that you shouldn't make that mistake in knocking over the water or whatever it is. In my opinion, fear of failure is something that we teach our kids and that all of us have been taught. And it's extremely dangerous. And you need to not care about failure. You need to give it an honest effort. We talked about in my class that those of you that graduate and by the time that you're 25, you've had 5 jobs, who cares? As long as at each stage you gave it an honest effort and it didn't work out and it wasn't what you wanted to do and you decided to move on, I don't have any problem with that. If you're going from one to the other and not trying, then I have a huge problem with that. But if you're going to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be resilient. It's how people make the Hall of Fame. You pick your team, I don't care, and you pick the best player and the person who's in the Hall of Fame. Right, a 300 batting average in baseball, you failed 7 out of 10 times, and you're still in the Hall of Fame because you kept it up. And so I just can't emphasize enough that resiliency and keep coming back and following your why, following your purpose is, for me, the single most important trait.
Do we have another question in the
Thank you.
audience? Yeah, go ahead, Gloria.
We learned in our organizational development class that you've never filed bankruptcy. What types of entrepreneurial skills have you implemented in your company to avoid filing bankruptcy?
So sort of a change management kind of, how have we evolved?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the big companies, I never really worried about General Electric or Lockheed. I have to tell you, but I own 5 little companies.
Yeah.
They range from $6 million, about $15 million in revenue to about $500,000 in revenue.
Yeah.
And it's really keeping your feet on the ground. You dream. There's a saying that was told: keep your head in the sky to dream, and keep your feet in the ground to be realistic. So everything we've done in these small companies is we were prudent, and we watched everything we did. Is what we did. When
Yeah.
you get into business like you're getting into now, I think that's where you're going with that. Then you got to watch what they call the cash flow, and what you spend, what you cash in, cash out, from that standpoint. And then you make sure, in my models, that I have these businesses, they're all owner operated. Meaning is, I'm a partner, and I oversee it, but there's somebody down there day to day. So they have a vested interest, and they have ownership, and they take it because if it sinks, they're out of a job, and they're also out of their investment. So yeah, it's all about getting buy-in that you're the owner. But you can get that owner. Even when I was at GE, I thought I owned GE. So every decision I made, when I was at GE or Lockheed, I thought it was my money I was spending. And I really believe, and every decision I made was based on that thing. When I had to make investments, buy companies for GE or Lockheed, would I spend my money? That was my question. And if I said I ain't gonna spend it, why would I want Lockheed or GE to spend? So I've been fortunate that I haven't had a bankruptcy. I've had restructuring, and I gotta be honest with you, you never want to do that because you hurt a lot of people when you do the restructuring. So I've always tried to avoid it, but when you go into an environment, I don't know if that answered what you're looking for.
I could add to that. Cash flow is everything. When we started our company locally, I'd go into work Saturday mornings, and Ken Larson would go into work Saturday mornings. I went in to do technical work. He went in to check the mail for checks coming in so that he was sure we were making the next payroll. So it's that. But I would say you want to avoid bankruptcy, and from an organizational development standpoint, tell your people that the quality of the product or service you provide has to delight the customer. If you take care of your customers and you're providing the value that Marshall says is at the heart of entrepreneurship, which I agree with completely, They're going to satisfy them, they're going to pay you, they're going to refer you, you're going to be able to grow. So I would say those things. Yeah, you got to keep your eye on the cash, but don't take your eye off the customer. And I think with customer expectations today being higher than ever, because they can Google 1,000 choices of where to go for a business that, may provide the same service as you do, unless you've really got a unique idea. You've got to understand the importance of that.